Hi guys, I'm Shmee, hello and welcome back to the channel where today I would like to talk about my recent announcement that I am buying a Zenvo TSR-S. Yes, the first full indisputable hypercar to be added to the Shmeemobiles to eventually join the other cars in the collection here at the Shmuseum. And I'd like to touch on some of the questions that you've been asking me, for example, about the Senna and what is a hypercar, about this particular car, why Zenvo, my history with Zenvo, the plans that are ahead, why I've gone for this rather than, let's say, buying a classic like an F50 or a 300 SL or one of the other cars that I've expressed interest in before, like the McLaren P1 or some of the other new hypercars coming along, and how really all of this came about, how you guys can be involved in it all as well, and what the plans are ahead for the Shmeemobile Zenvo TSR-S. The first thing that we need to touch on is why I'm calling the Zenvo my first ever hypercar when we're here in the garage with the McLaren Senna and arguably the Ford GT as well. Well, I've specifically used the term indisputable hypercar because the Senna, I feel, sits on the edge, the border of a very extreme supercar and a baby hypercar. Now, there's no specific definition for these terms, for sports car, for supercar, for hypercar. There is for megacar, it means 1 megawatt of power, so 1,360 horsepower. But a hypercar is much more an emotionally driven thing. There's no metric by which you can specifically put it into that category. It's a mixture of the price point, the rarity, how often you see them, how many there are, and of course the performance. Now, when it comes to performance, the Senna is pretty much stratospheric, but price point relative to other hypercars now, it's actually quite a lot closer to the supercar category, and there are quite a few of them. There are 500 road cars, plus some prototypes, plus the Senna GTRs, so you end up probably at around 600 cars, which relative to cars like the Jesko, 125, the AMG ONE, 275, the Bugatti Chirons of various different derivatives like the Chiron Supersport 300 Plus or the Pur Sport, it's actually quite a lot when it comes to the Senna, and there are just over 1,000 in total for GTs by the time they're all manufactured as well. So for me, the Senna sits on this border, and I know we've gone backwards and forwards on this a little bit, but that explains why I've called the Zenvo the indisputable first Shmeemobile hypercar. I want to talk though, why now, why this car? There's so much more to it, and I think fundamentally I should explain why a couple of months ago I said it wasn't about to be time for a hypercar, and here we are. The Zenvo is now on order because there is a bit more to this. So I had obviously alluded not too long ago about perhaps looking at the McLaren P1s, which coincidentally would be at least at the same price point as the Zenvo, and I want to touch more on why that works out and why I've gone in the direction that I have. Of course, I make no secret that I rather love the Mercedes-Benz 300 SL, the Roadster in particular. That would be a good $1 million or so worth of car, perhaps a little bit more depending on the specification, or even a Ferrari F50. That would be a $3 million, $4 million car, something like that, completely different category in entirety. And I want to explain a little bit more of this because, like I said, I didn't think it was going to happen. It has been quite a good year in terms of various businesses and things I've got going on. Of course, I've taken a little bit of a step back on the Shmee 150 channel, slightly slowed things down because of all of the other priorities, and obviously doing things here at the Shmuseum and the new channel as well. Of course, a huge thanks to all of you who are subscribed to that, but it's pretty much kept the ball rolling, kept everything flowing, even if views back off a little bit because of some of the older videos which weren't actually monetized that have now kind of dropped off the algorithms. But all of the new stuff I appreciate when you watch an awful lot. But combining all of this together, I figured you only really live once, and this opportunity is here at the moment, and I wasn't going to let it pass. So that is why this is happening. I'd like to talk about the price points of some of these cars, some of the cars I've just mentioned, and some of the other new cars that are out there on the market that you might have thought that I would be interested in, and why I've not gone for them. And I find this fascinating. There are things you probably wouldn't have considered, and I apologize in advance that I will jump around a little bit in terms of currencies, but we'll try and do this as much as possible in British pounds, the most relevant, of course, for the Shmeemobiles here in the UK. If we talk about a car like the Senna, the base price of the Senna, before any options, before any taxes, which represent about 20% plus some registration fees, you're talking a car that started with a base of £620,000. Now, pretty much all modern era hypercars are in seven figures, 1 million plus. Most of them are now 2 million plus, which is why I pop it into that supercar, hypercar boundary, we could say. But it's a very, very different proposition to go for a Zenvo than it is for some of the others. To give you some examples, a Koenigsegg Jesko, if you take base specification before you go for the absolute and before you do a clear carbon body or anything like that, is a £2.1 million car. The Bugatti Chiron Supersport is a £2.8 million car. The AMG ONE, a car that you know I'm a big fan of, is a £2 million car, all starting with a 2. And relatively speaking, I felt like the Zenvo was a very attractive proposition, starting at about £1.3 million in terms of how it punches, its performance, how crazy it is, how bespoke it is, and what it offers at the price point. And this is a relevant consideration for me. I am pushing the boat out to buy this car. I'm not going to lie. I say to buy, of course, I will be financing it, but I do need to put in a fairly large deposit to make this happen in the first place and make sure that the payments and all of that side of things are going to be covered. But it is a relevant topic for me. I can go out and perhaps purchase the Zenvo, but I wouldn't be in a position to purchase a £2 million plus car. Perhaps that's one to save for the future. We shall have to wait and see what happens in terms of that. The other cars that are out there on the market, a P1 I suspect would be a touch more than the Zenvo. The F50 would be significantly more. Other cars of interest that I've mentioned before, the Carrera GT, that would be somewhere around $750,000. The Lexus LFA, well, they seem to have gone completely stratospheric recently, which is quite unusual, but perhaps $500,000, a little bit more than that in terms of pounds. So you could argue, why not go down that route? And I want to explain more of that later on as well. When it comes to a purchase like this, I think it's fair to say it is something you do with your heart, not necessarily with your head. Nobody needs a 1,200 horsepower car, but it's all about the rawness, about how it makes you feel, about how exciting it is. And for me, it's a car that I've enjoyed a few times. In fact, it was quite recently, only a couple of months ago, that a Zenvo TSR-S was parked right on the spot that I'm currently sat, which is bizarre to think that mine will be here in not all that long, somewhere in the middle of next year. And I'll talk more about that in a moment as well. But I've actually known the team from Zenvo now for about 7.5 years, and over that time filmed a number of the different models when they've been launched, riding on board and even driving them as well. And I'd like to run through this very quickly because it winds back to early 2014, in fact February 2014, out in Dubai, when I got to take a look at the Zenvo ST1, the supercharged, turbocharged one, the first model that the company had introduced, and realized or got a small sense of what it was all about. It was the following summer, July 2015, that I rode on board the ST1 for the first time at the Goodwood Festival of Speed and felt some of the rawness. A day I haven't actually forgotten, a car that was really dramatic in every way, a proper hypercar. It was about 2 years after that, in summer 2017, when Zenvo were back at the Goodwood Festival of Speed with the TSR, the twin supercharged race, the model that effectively gave us a view of what was coming with the TSR-S, that introduced that, but being a strict race car. But one actually I saw when I visited the factory recently, because they had it there, the yellow race car as well. Shortly after that, at the end of 2017, I drove the TS1 GT, the twin supercharged one, GT being the road version of the TSR, or the TSR-S, you could say, the regular, more comfortable GT iteration, which is still available now. And of course, I considered whether to go for that or the TSR-S, but drove that car and got more of a sense of what this thing was going to be like. In 2018 came the arrival of the TSR-S. We took a look at it at the Geneva Motor Show, a first walk around to see how this active wing worked, amongst others. And then a month or so later, down in the south of France during Top Marks Monaco, I hopped on board with company founder Troels Voltsen and experienced it for myself on a run up some twisty roads as a passenger. And that was really something that stood out a lot. And this has led me very much towards where we are now. Since then, I've also seen a car at Topaz, the white one, that I took a look at as well at the factory, the white one with the blue carbon fiber. That was at Topaz to get full bespoke paint protection film, as we've seen with pretty much all of the Shmeemobiles as well. And then the most recent experience was only a couple of months ago, and of course this is what we were talking about behind the scenes, when the team from Zenvo came here to the Shmuseum with the blue car that had also been at Goodwood, and I took it out for a drive. My first drive in the TSR-S, and a drive that stuck with me, upshifting through the tunnel with those bangs, explosions and fireballs out the back, was something pretty epic. And that is, like I say, what a car like this is about. It is emotionally driven. It is a car that makes you feel, wow, this is epic, this is extraordinary, this is something that is pure fun. And I think it's all about passion. And that's what's led me to where we are now and buying a Zenvo TSR-S. You might be thinking there has got to be more to this, and you are not wrong. If you look behind me, and pretty much all of the cars in my collection, I've bought them from new. I've ordered the car from new, I've done a crazy bespoke specification, and they are cars that I've gone through the experience of speccing it, perhaps seeing it being built, taking delivery of it, and enjoying all of those early miles, doing the running in process, taking it to a track for the first time, taking it on a road trip for the first time, and so much more. That's been the case with all of these, and that's one of the reasons why I've decided to go down this path as opposed to the path of, let's say, buying a Carrera GT or a Lexus LFA, or perhaps even both. Now, I know that perhaps doesn't make a lot of sense, but if you think as well how much making these videos is part of my life. I've been doing this now for almost 12 years, and I've made about 5,000 YouTube videos sharing this journey with you, the journey of the Shmeemobiles, the journey and growth of my car collection. And a big part of this for me is the opportunities that Zenvo are presenting in terms of what I can share with you guys and actually the build of the car. Now, I didn't talk too much about this in, let's say, the announcement video, but this is very much a journey all the way through, to go from here with a Road to Zenvo series, to see various parts of the car being built, being assembled. For example, how do you make a carbon wheel, and can I do parts of that? What happens when they put the engine onto the engine dyno and start it and run it for the first time? How does the car get fully assembled? This is something that we are going to be able to cover and share, and this is something that I am more than excited about. It gives this extra dimension beyond just say, let's purchase a car. I know this is a strange concept perhaps, but it feels, as I've said a few times, so much more emotionally driven for me to be part of this whole process, to bring you along for this process, and then ultimately, of course, to take delivery of the car, which then kickstarts the next part of the journey, which is that with Zenvo, this car is going to be going around the world to different events. It will be on show at different events. You guys will be able to see it as well. I'll be able to meet you there. And of course, it gives me the opportunity to actually drive the car in some pretty crazy places, which is totally awesome. It's something I love doing. As you know, I took my Ford GT to the US. I frequently take the Shmeemobiles across to Europe, to Germany, to Italy, to wherever it might be. And to be able to be so connected with this car is something that is beyond the typical purchase. It's not the same as just going to a dealer, placing an order, and the car turns up and off you go and do your thing. Of course, Zenvo don't produce a lot of cars. They only make a handful of cars a year. So being able to have my car doing all of this is something really special as well, to be able to be doing all of this with Zenvo. And like I say, to have the opportunity, and it's a huge thanks to Zenvo for this, to be able to bring you along for that, to see behind the scenes, especially as the company have some very exciting things coming up as well. So for me, this is so much more about the journey. This is so much more about the memories, about the experience, and it's one reason over so many others why the Zenvo TSR-S stood out compared to some of the other competitors, let's say, on the market, to have these opportunities directly with Zenvo. I don't know if you'll remember this, but a few years ago, I told a story about how around 7 or 8 years ago, I had come this close to buying a Koenigsegg. In particular, the Koenigsegg CCXR Special one, the one-off light blue famous car that I actually filmed in London and Paris, and I think the south of France a number of times prior to that. Well, unfortunately, it eluded me, and it would now be worth probably 5 times what it cost back then. And that's something that we've seen across the market in recent years. Cars like Carrera GTs, I remember being offered one for about £225,000. Now they're £750,000. The Lexus LFA, I remember being offered one for under £200,000. Now they'd be 500, 600, who even knows with some of the recent auction prices. And this is something that I often reflect back on, and did I miss out? Should I have done it when the time was right? And I think the future of Zenvo is very exciting. Of course, there are things I can't talk about, but they have assembled a new and very experienced team. They have a lot of exciting things in the works, and it's a company I really want to get closer to in the future, to see what happens and to be part of this journey really as they expand, as they produce new models. And I think the TSR-S is the perfect example of a hypercar. It looks wild, it looks brutal and mad. It has some crazy tech going on with the wing, the centripetal wing that moves from side to side and forwards and backwards and all over the place. And it's a bespoke car, an opportunity to create some crazy specification, to do something bright, to do the inlays in the carbon fiber weave, to do all sorts of different colors. I'm going to go, as I mentioned, for a left-hand drive car. And in case you're wondering, even though it will be a UK registered car with a Shmee number plate in my name on the registration, it's going to be a left-hand drive car because I will probably do significantly more miles in the USA and around Europe, which are left-hand drive regions. And eventually, when the time comes perhaps to sell the car with these kind of things, things, you move them around the world. They won't necessarily stay in the same country. It's not like, say, the Hurricane STO, which if I ever sold would remain here in the UK most likely. It could probably end up going anywhere. So it's going to be a left-hand drive, and in the collection I have a couple, the SLS, the Ford GT, the Shelby GT500, so I'm pretty used to left-hand drive cars. But going through all of this, the Spec is going to be part of the road to Zenvo, of course, to be part of this journey. And after my experiences from the past, knowing where hypercars are going, I've just kind of, again, as I said earlier, felt that I want to do it. I want to be part of this. I want to try it. Have you ever seen a hypercar video series of the build from the person who is purchasing the car? Not, let's say, a manufacturer-produced, glamorous, lovely, wonderful factory video, but the series as you and I bring this car to life, as we see it going from parts to the finished car here in the Shmeemuseum. And for me, whatever the future is, to have been able to do this is just something that a slightly younger myself would have looked at and almost laughed. How could that ever be possible? Well, somehow here we are, so thank you for it. And that's really part of why I want to do this, why I want to make all of this happen. Believe me, I find this crazy. I still can't quite get my head around the fact that I am buying a Zenvo TSR-S. It's not a long-term loan or anything like that, in case you're wondering. I'm actually buying this ridiculous thing. It is the definition of a hypercar. It is the start of an exceptional journey, and I think it's something so unique. I've been lucky to visit many different factories before, from Koenigsegg to Bugatti to Pagani to McLaren, Ferrari, Lamborghini, to see so many different places, and of course to visit the Zenvo factory a week or two ago as well, to announce this news really, to be there, to go through all of the papers and to start on some of the early specifications, which at the moment, believe me, are very wide open. I do need to spec it quite soon because we have plans effectively to take the car to the event circuit, you could say, next summer. So there's going to be a lot of work needed to get it ready in time and to get it to the places that it needs to go. But I trust the team at Zenvo to have that under control, to hopefully be able to bring everything together. But this is just the wildest thing from my dreams, to be making such a purchase, the biggest purchase that I've ever made outside of, let's say, the Shmeemuseum or something like that. But in terms of cars, for sure, of course, we're talking Senna plus GT together, effectively. It's a big decision, but something that I've been thinking about in recent months and thought, you know what, why not? This opportunity is here, let's do it together. Let's get this journey started, and I can't believe it's actually happening. So hopefully in about a month or so, I'll be able to get out to the factory, we'll go through some specifications, we'll then start the process. Things like the carbon wheels take a lot of time to manufacture, and the body panels and other components, and we'll be able to see a lot of that, and a lot of what goes into such a bespoke vehicle before getting it out there, before getting it out to see some of you guys, and to as many events as possible over the next couple of years, and who knows what beyond. All I know is that this is mad, and I can't thank you guys enough for being part of the Shmee 150 journey up to this point. Every year, I think, surprises me, and never did I think this is a path that was going to become possible. So thank you millions of times for making all of this happen. For now, though, that's a little bit more behind why I am buying a Zenvo TSR-S. Let's do this. It's going to be epic. That's it for now, though. Thank you very much for watching, as always, guys. I'll see you again very soon. Cheers.